All right, welcome to the show, everybody. We got a big one for you today. So in just a second, I'm going to kick it off with Israel and Gaza updates. We have confirmed reports of people now starving to death in Gaza. The videos, the pictures coming out of there are beyond brutal. Honestly, I don't have adequate words to describe the horror that's unfolding right in front of our eyes. Then we'll get to Benjamin Netanyahu disrespecting Joe Biden, even after Joe Biden has basically bent over backwards to accommodate him in facilitating this genocide. We have the IDF caught on camera bragging about murdering unarmed senior citizens. This stuff is depraved, man. It's absolutely depraved. So we'll talk about all that. Then we'll get into Bill Maher has lost his goddamn mind with his new proposal. Even old Bill Maher would scoff at new Bill Maher for the stuff that he's currently saying. So we'll talk about that. Then we get to Steve Bannon, shockingly, turns on Donald Trump. This may be a first. I don't know if Sloppy Steve has ever turned on Donald Trump before. I know Trump has turned on Sloppy Steve, but Trump at one point or another has turned on everybody. But this is really interesting. We'll dive into that. And then the Pope has a controversial hot take on Ukraine and Russia that I want to share with you. So that's also fun. Everybody do me a favor. Please subscribe to the channel. Helps out massively in the algorithm. Costs you nothing. And without further ado, here we go. Let's dive into it. So let's take a moment. I want to show you over 150 days have passed since the start of Israel's aggression on the Gaza Strip. And we have this video here from AJ Plus, which shows you the extent of the devastation. And I want to play this for you here. And for everybody listening podcast style, I'll read for you what's on the screen as you see these absolutely destroyed, dilapidated buildings that have been reduced to rubble. So let's dive into it here. So these are exclusive images showing the scope of the destruction unfolding in Gaza. I mean, it's just rubble everywhere. Israel has dropped over 70,000 tons of explosives on Gaza since October 7th. 70,000 homes have been completely destroyed. 290,000 more homes were partially destroyed and are now uninhabitable. Schools and universities were not spared. Israel has completely destroyed over 100 schools and universities in Gaza and partially destroyed over 300 educational institutions. Israel's attacks on Gaza have also hit places of worship. More than 210 mosques are completely destroyed. And again, for everybody just listening to this podcast style, what's on the screen right now is just mountains of rubble as far as the eye can see. Not a single building spared anywhere in sight. 281 mosques were partially destroyed. Horrific. In addition, 3 churches were destroyed, some of which date back hundreds of years. 31 out of 36 hospitals in Gaza are now out of service due to the siege. 31 out of 36. Think about that. 53 health centers were also taken out of service. 11,000 wounded people need to leave Gaza for treatment. More than 30,700 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. That's an underestimate, y'all. I'm going to give you the Euromed Monitor numbers in a little bit, but it's significantly more than that. They say including 12,000 children have been killed. Again, that number's actually higher. Okay. So, some of the updates here. We discussed the other week that the U.S. was airdropping aid into Gaza. Now, the reason why that's absurd is because Israel's our ally. We arm them. We fund them. We've given them basically a green light to do what they're doing. And instead of forcing them to allow in the aid or stopping arming them, we don't, but we do say, we're going to keep arming you and funding you, and then we'll airdrop some aid into Gaza to try to go around our client state. This is absolutely bananas. Well, guess what? Come to find out, Jerusalem Post reports, killed by U.S. aid, 5 Gazans dead after being struck by airdropped packages. So now, on top of having to worry about bombs and starving to death, even the aid falling from the sky could kill you. Now, by the way, later on, we'll get into the numbers of how much aid is getting in by airdropping versus what's needed in order for people to be okay. And suffice to say, it is nowhere near sufficient, not even close. Nobody can make an argument that it's sufficient. All right, so this might shock you here, guys, but there's been a bunch of reports at the New York Times, at the Washington Post, at CNN. They've had a horrific pro-Israel bias where, in some instances, some of these news agencies run their stories through IDF censors before it can be broadcast. I mean, that's ludicrous. Of course, they're not going to allow anything that shows them in a negative light. And so there's been scandal after scandal with how biased U.S. media is towards Israel. Well, to my surprise, now the carnage and the devastation has become so bad that there's even some truth being dropped in mainstream U.S. media outlets, because at this point, guys, it's undeniable. What we're witnessing is undeniable. So here's one example. You're going to have Clarissa Ward of CNN. She's basically going to grill one of these Israelis who's on the ground protesting the idea of sending in aid to starving women and children and civilians in Gaza. This is a really, really wild back and forth. Let's watch.
Under international law, it's Israel's obligation to make sure that the ordinary citizens of Gaza don't starve to death. And right now they are starving to death.
Hamas is making it very difficult because Hamas is not allowing this to arrive. They're not holding it. They're not receiving it. But they'll do it. I'm telling you here and now. If we knew it's getting to children of Gaza, we would do it. This does not arrive at their doorstep. This arrives into the tunnels of Hamas that are fighting us and holding our hostages.
There's no evidence to support the idea that all of this aid is going to Hamas.
Not to the rest of the population. This is intelligence only for terror. That's why they should get only the minimum calories required to survive.
They're starving to death.
They are not.
They are starving to death.
You know what? If they are starving to death, give the hostages back. No, a single loaf of bread should go there till our hostages are coming back.
Now, let's be clear. There have been proposals on the table. Hamas will agree to release all of the hostages for a permanent ceasefire. It's the Israeli government saying no to that. So let's be clear. They act like that's not on the table. That is on the table, and it's your own government that's blocking it.
To many people in the world, listening to what you're saying and what you're protesting for, it sounds like A, a contravention of international law.
True.
And B, incredibly callous in the face of an epic humanitarian catastrophe, in the face of children starving to death. People can't understand why anyone in their right mind would advocate for stopping aid.
Hamas has no fair play. Hamas has no rules. Hamas is holding civilians.
Think about what they're saying. Bro, they have no rules. They're barbarians. They're savages. So obviously we need to have no rules and be barbarians and savages right back, bro. What do you even say to that? These people are so far gone. There's no words.
You know, even if there is a humanitarian crisis, and there is not, even if there is, it's my right and my duty to prioritize the life of few Bibas, a 1-year-old baby that is there, over any Gazan baby.
Wow. What a poisonous, toxic ideology. Your babies don't count because they're not my babies. They're not our babies. This is what your brain looks like when it's hyped up on ethno-nationalism and theocracy. This is as extremely sectarian as a human being can get. Your babies don't count. My babies count more. These are starving babies we're talking about. She's like, tough. Too bad. Again, this is on CNN. All right. More. UNRWA report says Israel coerced some agency employees to falsely admit Hamas links. So remember this fake scandal that came out, I don't know how long ago it was now, a month or so ago, about how there's 13 or 12 members of the UNRWA, that's the aid agency for the UN in the Palestinian territories, and they are Hamas. It's terrible. Well, come to find out, the intelligence report that came out of Israel, which pretended to prove it, had literally zero evidence whatsoever. Now, the U.S. and Israel and many other countries cut off aid to the UNRWA as a result of that allegation. Zero evidence of that. Now, come to find out, the IDF tortured some aid workers into falsely admitting that they were Hamas. And what does it say in the piece? Well, as Mac points out here, the document says several UNRWA Palestinian staffers had been detained by the Israeli army and added that the ill treatment and abuse they said they had experienced, including severe physical beatings, waterboarding, and threats of harm to family members. In other words, they did brutal and vicious torture to try to get false confessions. Listen, if Israel was any other country, if Israel was an enemy country of the U.S., we would have been talking about regime change 145 days ago. We would have been talking about how this is a terror state. You know, it's a theocracy and an ethno-state and an authoritarian regime, and they are ripe for regime change because they are uncontrollable. They don't care about any rules, any laws, the liberal order internationally. They don't care about any of that stuff. But since they're our ally, we're still funding them and arming them in the midst of all this. Take the exact same set of facts, but pretend it's Iran and not Israel. What would the reaction be? We all know. Torturing to get false confessions out of aid workers. All right, here we go. I'm going to give you guys your fair warning for this segment. Fair warning, okay? Don't watch this if you're queasy and you can't handle stuff like it. An Israeli soldier admits he murdered an unarmed elderly Palestinian man who had his arms up in the air and begged to spare his life. The other soldiers applaud and praise him for it, shake his hand, give him a pat on the shoulder, and say, all the respect. So all of this is caught on camera. You know how we have those police body cameras in the U.S.? Well, this is the same thing. All that stuff is caught on camera. You could see them talking. You could see them all jovial about what they did here. Again, warning, but let's watch. I'm going to mute it because they're talking Hebrew, but I'll read for you what it says. This is the dead 72-year-old. What happened there? We opened the door. He fluttered, came in my direction, and did like this, waves his hands. These are the Israeli soldiers talking. I killed him with 4 bullets. He was the only one? I don't know. We didn't have time. There could be more. There was another room. We didn't have time. And he did like this. No, no. Yes, no, no. And you took him down? Excellent. Ha, 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 ha. Lior, what happened? What did you see there? A man. I want to drop another shell in this location. What, without a weapon? He had something on him? No. He hid beside the bed. All respect. Okay, let's go in the house. It won't shoot. I'm replacing him. Stay. He's coming. Stay outside. So this was during the altercation. What we saw before was after it, when they're celebrating killing an unarmed elderly man. This was during the altercation. You're going to hear the bullets. There it is. There it is. So you could see the guy right there. 72-year-old man, unarmed, hands up, basically begging for his life, murdered. And then the IDF brags about it afterwards. I remember when I said, what was it, a couple of weeks into this, that the IDF are acting like Nazis. This is like Nazi-type stuff. And then every day since then, they've verified exactly what I pointed out. And at this point, I don't know how anybody can deny it. How can you deny it? How can anybody look at this and be like, let me give you some rationalization or justification for what's going on here. Hamas, bro. Hamas really evil, bro. Is this 72-year-old unarmed man, is he Hamas? Are all the women and children who've been killed Hamas? Are all the hospitals bombed Hamas? Are all the schools bombed Hamas? Are all the marketplaces bombed Hamas? Again, what are you supposed to say in response to this? How is the world supposed to react to this? It's unconscionable, what we're witnessing. This is in the Associated Press. It's not just the Israeli bombs that have killed children in Gaza. Now, some are dying of hunger, too. I'm going to have another video from CNN for you on this in just a second. We're even there admitting the scope of the devastation. It's not just Israeli bombs that have killed children in war-ravaged Gaza. Now some are dying of hunger. Officials have been warning for months that Israel's siege and offensive were pushing the Palestinian territory into famine. Hunger is the most acute in northern Gaza, which has been isolated by Israeli forces and has suffered long cutoffs of food supplies. At least 20 people have died from malnutrition and dehydration at the North's Kamal Adwan and Shifa hospitals, according to the health ministry. Most of the dead are children, including ones as old as 15, as well as a 72-year-old man. Particularly vulnerable children are also beginning to succumb in the south, where access to aid is more regular. At the Emirati hospital in Rafah, 16 premature babies have died of malnutrition-related causes over the past 5 weeks, one of the senior doctors told the Associated Press. Now remember, guys, these are just the Western verified numbers, which usually means it's like UN verified numbers. And as we know, the UN numbers have undercounted relative to the Euromed Monitor numbers, which are always a little bit higher. So whatever we're getting here is a very, very conservative estimate of the number of people who are actually dying from starvation. Quote, "The child deaths we feared are here," said UNICEF's Middle East chief in a statement earlier this week. Israel's bombardment and ground assaults have already wreaked a high toll among children, who, along with women, make up nearly 3/4 of the more than 30,800 Palestinians killed, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Malnutrition is generally slow to bring death, striking children and the elderly first. Other factors can play a role. Underfed mothers have difficulty breastfeeding children. Diarrheal diseases, rampant in Gaza due to lack of clean water and sanitation, leave many unable to retain any of the calories they ingest. Jesus Christ. Malnutrition weakens immune systems, sometimes leading to death from other diseases. So in other words, you catch a cold when you're malnourished, that can kill you. Israel largely shut off entry of food, water, medicine, and other supplies after launching its assault on Gaza following Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel. And then they go on to say here, I want to give you a little bit more of so what they're actually doing to try to handle the situation, because it's as desperate as anything I've ever seen. Conditions in the north, largely under Israeli control for months, have become desperate. Entire districts of Gaza City and surrounding areas have been reduced to rubble by Israeli forces. Still, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians remain. Meat, milk, vegetables, and fruit are nearly impossible to find, according to several residents who spoke to the AP. The few items in shops are random and sold at hugely inflated prices, mainly nuts, snacks, and spices. People have taken barrels of chocolate from bakeries and are selling tiny smears of it. Most people eat a weed that crops up in empty lots, known as kubeza. Fatima Shaheen, a 70-year-old who lives with her 2 sons and their children in northern Gaza, said boiled kubeza is her main meal. So weeds that they find in the ground. And her family has also ground up food meant for rabbits to use as flour. So eating animal food and eating weeds. Quote, "We are dying for a piece of bread," Shaheen said. Kamar Ahmed said his 18-month-old daughter, Myra, eats mostly boiled weeds. "There is no food that suits her age," said Ahmed, a researcher with Euromed Human Rights Monitor and an economic journalist. His 70-year-old father gives his own food to Ahmed's young son, Olian. "We try to make him eat and he refuses," Ahmed said of his father. Mahmoud Shalabi, who lives in the Jabalia refugee camp, said he saw a man in the market giving a bag of potato chips to his 2 sons and tell them to make it last for breakfast and lunch. "Everyone know I has lost weight," said Shalabi, the senior program manager for the aid group Medical Aid for Palestinians in northern Gaza. Guys, this goes on. This goes on. So one of the doctors says his staff is currently treating 300 to 400 children a day, and 75% of them are suffering from malnutrition. So it's here. It's here. People are dying from starvation. People are dying from thirst. People are dying from basically dysentery, diarrhea, because they're drinking water that's not clean. If you get a cold, you could die because there's no food, there's no nourishment. This is hell on earth, and Israel's doing it on purpose. Remember, guys, the old statistic, it's even worse now, but the old statistic was Israel was blocking 70% of the humanitarian aid from getting in. And this is what it looks like. This is what the reality looks like on the ground. All right, here we go. Yet again, we're at the point now where some truth is even getting through on CNN. So watch this segment. It speaks for itself.
A warning to our viewers that what you are about to see is quite disturbing, and it has to do with children. This is the human cost of the Israel-Gaza war. These are tiny figures of children on the walls of our studio, one for almost each of the 12,800 kids who have died in Gaza, according to numbers from Gaza's health ministry. The death toll, quite frankly, is hard to keep up with. Airstrikes and now malnutrition and dehydration are killing them. Here's a glimpse inside Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, where several children have died of starvation.
Tiny limbs, bones protruding. The constant sound of crying from children now facing starvation in Gaza. These were little Yazan's final moments.
Look at this. Look at this absolutely emaciated child.
His tiny fingers gripped in his mother's hand.
Yazan al-Kafarne was just 10 years old when he died on Monday. And a day later, UNICEF sounded this alarm. The babies of thousands of women who are due to give birth in the next month in the Gaza Strip are at risk of dying. Premature births are up. Mothers, dehydrated and traumatized, struggle to breastfeed. They can't find formula. They can't find clean water. And without relief, the threat from famine could eclipse that of airstrikes, like the one this past weekend in Rafah that killed 5-month-olds Wasim and Naim Abu Anza, twins, long awaited by their parents, who finally conceived 11 years after they married, according to Reuters. Their mother, Rania, told the news agency, "We were asleep. We were not shooting and we were not fighting. What is their fault? What is their fault? What is her fault?" In October, an Israeli strike killed 11-year-old Malak Sharaf, along with her 10-year-old brother Malik, and their 6- and 3-year-old sisters Yasmin and Noor, according to the Washington Post. And 13 of their cousins also died. In October, Al Jazeera reported that an airstrike on a home where Gaza bureau chief Wael al-Dadu's family was sheltering after being displaced killed his wife, his 15-year-old son Mahmoud, his 7-year-old daughter Sham, and his 1.5-year-old grandson Adam. The distraught journalist carrying Adam's tiny body through Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital shortly afterward.
It is pretty tough video to watch, and it's actually even worse than this, because a statement from the family said that there were 12 members of the al-Dahdu family who were killed. 9 of them were children.
In November,
let me just point out, there's a panic right now about how, like, the ADL is very fearful because they say, well, the young generation is abandoning Israel. And in their mind, they say, well, they're being brainwashed into taking that position. Does it look like it requires brainwashing in order to come to that position? If you consume even 2% of what's going on the ground in Gaza, if you get the news of just 2% of the devastation on purpose, you're going to come away being incredibly sympathetic to Palestinians. And by the way, what's the response? Well, it passed through committee earlier this week that the U.S. wants to potentially ban TikTok because, you know, young people are getting a lot of news and information on TikTok, specifically when it comes to this conflict, and we can't have that. We can't have a free flow of information and people deviating from the establishment line in the West.
Brother and sister Tariq and Reem, 5 and 3 years old, were asleep side by side when an airstrike killed them in southern Gaza. Their grandfather, Khalid Nabhan, told CNN he was wishing, hoping that they were only sleeping, but they weren't sleeping. They were gone. Al Jazeera reported that Salma Jaber was fleeing Gaza City with her family in December when they came under fire, and the 4-year-old was shot in the neck and died. The middle child in the family, Salma's father described her as mischievous and intelligent. And in January, 6-year-old Hind Rajab was trapped in a car for days with the bodies of several family members, all killed trying to escape northern Gaza. This harrowing audio of her cousin calling the Palestine Red Crescent for help captured the moment that their car came under attack from an Israeli tank.
انتوا جوا السيارة. Hello. Hello.
Hind's body was found the following month, along with 2 ambulance workers who had gone missing trying to rescue her. There are too many victims to name, there's too many to fathom, and there are countless orphans, like Lana, whose story CNN's Jomana Karadje told.
6-year-old Lana was under the rubble of her home for 3 days. Mommy and Daddy are underneath it, she says. I just want Mama. I want Baba. I want my family, Lana cries.
According to figures from the Gaza Health Ministry, more than 72,000 Palestinians have been injured since the start of the war, and a large proportion of them are children. Dr. Mohammed Soubey is an emergency room physician who came from California to help in Gaza.
My first several patients were pediatric patients. One shot in the arm while he was sleeping in the tent. Another 2 kids pulled out of the rubble. We're still waiting to locate their family. Gunshot wound to the thigh in a 3-month-old, crushed extremities.
Of course, this
Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, every Israeli general, all these people who are steering the car, they all need to be locked up in The Hague. War crime on top of war crime within war crime. Like I said, Nazi-level atrocities is where we're at right now. And anybody denying it is either a liar or they're not familiar with the news and the information coming out from on the ground, where even CNN now is forced to admit it. And Joe Biden is arming this. Joe Biden is funding this. Joe Biden is wagging his finger in public while behind the scenes saying, green light! It's despicable. All right, so this is wild. Israel went to Jenin today in the West Bank and kidnapped a 7-year-old girl from her family. They do these things often, but we rarely catch them on film. So that is indeed what happens. Here, I'm going to play for you the video. It's a little shaky, but you can see 2 Israeli soldiers outside of a house. I'm going to jump ahead here because they just go in, and then eventually they come dragging a 7-year-old girl, as you can see. Don't worry, I'm sure she has Hamas ties. I'm sure that she's a terrorist. I'm sure she's a threat. By the way, this is the only move they have, right? This is all Israel has. Just shriek Hamas at the top of your lungs in every single scenario and hope that a bunch of absolute morons and idiots and psychopaths say, yeah, good enough. A picture showing aid drops and Israeli airstrikes targeting civilian areas in northern Gaza at the same time. This is as dystopian as it gets. This should be on the cover of every history book of the 21st century textbook, says David Vevers. Hear, hear. So this is interesting. According to the Wall Street Journal, Qatar is threatening to deport Hamas chiefs if they don't agree to a hostage truce deal. Ryan Grimm says, releasing 40 hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a 6-week pause feels like a deal that could save a lot of lives, but only if Israel actually allows in aid. Otherwise, the death by starvation just worsens. And you know what? I'll go a step further. There's a reason why Hamas has said, we're not going to do a deal for the remaining hostages without a permanent ceasefire. Because if it's a 6-week ceasefire, okay, you stave off inevitable death and genocide another 6 weeks, but then you go right back to the same thing that's happening now, an ethnic cleansing and a genocide. To say 6-week pause, if we're witnessing a genocide, which we are, how absurd is that? After 6 weeks, we go right back to doing the genocide. Why would anybody agree to that? Of course nobody should agree to that. It needs to be a permanent ceasefire. And by the way, if we're being serious, which nobody is, but if we're being serious, it shouldn't just be permanent ceasefire and like that's the end of the conversation. It should be release every single Palestinian hostage / political prisoner, of which there are thousands of them. So all the hostages for all the hostages, permanent ceasefire, and also, of course, we need to get to the core, the root of the problem here, and come up with some lasting deal. Palestinian sovereignty and independence and freedom, which of course is nowhere in the conversation, and the people who are orchestrating this genocide have bragged about blocking a Palestinian state in perpetuity. So Biden was caught on a hot mic the other night after the State of the Union, and he basically said, look, I spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu and I said to him, we're going to have a come to Jesus moment. And the implication there is we're going to sit down and have a conversation. I'm going to let him know that certain things need to stop and we need to, stop massacring civilians, stop making the political situation worse. This is hurting me, this is hurting you, this is hurting Israel. Some of these things he said in his actual speech, but this was a hot mic after the fact where he brings up the come to Jesus moment thing. Okay. So now Benjamin Netanyahu is asked about that hot mic moment, and here's how he responds to Biden.
Well, I don't know exactly what the president meant, but if he meant by that I'm pursuing private policies against the wish of the majority of Israelis, and that this is hurting the interests of Israel, then he's wrong on both counts. Number one, these are not my private policies only. They're policies supported by the overwhelming majority of the Israelis. They support the action that we're taking to destroy the remaining terrorist battalions of Hamas. They say that once we destroy the Hamas, the last thing we should do is put in Gaza, in charge of Gaza, the Palestinian Authority that educates its children towards terrorism and pays for terrorism.
So even the group that runs the West Bank, which are collaborators with the Israeli government and the IDF, they're basically their lapdogs. They even say, no, they train terrorists and love terrorism, so we're not going to have a deal that involves them. Well, if the faction of Palestinians that are the utmost collaborators with Israel are effectively called terrorists here or terrorist sympathizers here, then what he's saying is no deal with anybody ever. Palestinians never get a state, independence, freedom. And so you're not a partner for peace. You are not a partner for peace. There's this ironic line that comes out of the top levels of the Israeli government where we don't have a partner for peace on the other side. You are not a partner for peace.
They also support my position that says that we should resoundingly reject the attempt to ram down our throats a Palestinian state. That is something that they agree on, and it's something that I think is also for the interests of Israel, because the majority of Israelis understand that if we don't do this, what we'll have is a repetition of the October 7th massacre, which is bad for Israel, bad for the Palestinians, bad for the future of peace in the Middle East. So the attempt to say that my policies are my private policies that are not supported by most Israelis is false. The vast majority.
So what we have here is Benjamin Netanyahu disrespecting Joe Biden and spitting in his eye. He talks like we don't give him billions of dollars and colossal amounts of weapons. He talks like the U.S. is the client state to Israel. Wrong. They are the client state to us. And if Joe Biden had any shame whatsoever, he would immediately put this fucker in his place. Cut off the money, cut off the weapons, sanction him, condemn him at the UN, sanction him economically and other top government officials who are facilitating this genocide. But we all know that's not going to happen. We all know that's not going to happen. How sad is that? By the way, I never say things like this, but how weak does he look? How weak does he look? This is as weak as you can get. He's slapping you around on TV for the world to see. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So there was a back and forth here with the Pentagon. A reporter said, Gaza needs 6.6 million meals a day. The U.S. provided 11,500, talking about the airdrops of aid. The Pentagon says, I'm certain that every single bit of aid helps. Unbelievable. In other words, the point here from the reporter is, you have to get the aid on the ground through. You have to open up the Rafah border. You have to get your rabid dog, Israel, under control. And the Pentagon's like, well, whatever. 6.6 million, 11,500. I'm sure the 11,500 is very appreciated. Even though some of the airdrops, by the way, are killing Palestinians on the ground because it's falling on top of their heads. Have you received assurances from the Israelis that they will not fire upon Palestinians as they seek to retrieve the aid? Remember, they've already done this multiple times. People going to get aid have been fired on by the IDF. The Pentagon said, quote, our focus is on delivering the aid. I'm not going to speak for the Israelis. So in other words, no, you have no assurances that Israel won't continue to murk the people who are trying to get the aid. That's what that means. Here are the updated numbers. 39,178 Palestinians killed in Gaza. 14,622 of them are children. 8,896 of them are women. 35,490 are civilians. We now have 73,300 injured people overall. 132 journalists killed. 2 million people homeless, displaced. 106,000 completely destroyed homes. 250,900 partially destroyed homes. 175 destroyed or damaged press headquarters, 432 schools that have been damaged, 2,120 destroyed factories, 621 mosques, 3 churches damaged, 756 healthcare professionals attacked, including 326 killed and 430 injured, 279 healthcare facilities hit, including 28 hospitals, 65 clinics, 186 ambulances. 199 heritage sites have been attacked. That's these, hundreds and hundreds of year-old relics of the past. I got more on that in a minute. 197 civil defense workers attacked, including 42 killed. 3,350 Palestinian political prisoners, hostages, and many of them have experienced torture. Israel's chief Sephardic rabbi declared that passing a law to draft all ultra-Orthodox men into the Israeli military would drive them to leave the country. Quote, they need to understand this. All these secular people don't get it, said Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef. So there's a big scandal that's going on internally in the Israeli government right now. You have some people who are saying, I know we've had exemptions for all the ultra-Orthodox that they don't have to do mandatory service in the military, but for this, we're going to revoke that. You guys need to pitch in just as much as anybody else. And the ultra-Orthodox are like, we're just literally not going to do that. And so what's the best case scenario? Best case scenario is they pass the law, forced conscription, and then all these fuckers leave. That'd be great. Maybe we'll actually get some land back to Palestinians in that scenario. But there's a big scandal going on about this internally in the Israeli government right now. The Israeli army destroyed the historic Baruch Castle in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip, which dates back to the year 1387 AD. The castle, built during the Mamluk era to serve as a midpoint between Damascus and Cairo. Israel destroyed the entire historical heritage of Gaza. Quote, today he is a baby, tomorrow he is a fighter. Rabbi Eliyahu Mali, head of the Sellers Yeshiva school in occupied Jaffa, incited his students serving in the Israeli occupation forces to kill everyone in Gaza, including babies. He referenced Jewish principles of war, stating, quote, the law, no soul shall live if you don't kill them. They will kill you. When asked if babies were included, he responded, same, shoot them. Mali also encouraged his audience to kill children and women of Gaza, claiming, quote, today's terrorists are the children of the previous operations that you kept alive. The women are actually the ones who create the terrorists. Now, you might say, well, Kyle, this is just some random schmuck. But add it to the list of the other comments that are very, very similar from top Israeli government officials that we've covered on this show before. Breaking, Israel imposes age restrictions at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Tensions escalate in Jerusalem as Israel reportedly has banned Palestinians under 40 from praying at Al-Aqsa Mosque ahead of Ramadan. Clashes have erupted following this announcement. That's good. So we also have this. The Oscars was last night, and there was a massive pro-Palestine protest on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. See if I can play some of this for you. So one of the people who won an award actually went up there and had some good commentary, basically condemning Israel for the genocide of Palestinians. So this is wild. A list of anti-Semitic offenses that have been codified into law by South Dakota, accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism. Example, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. That is now anti-Semitic. So in other words, to cover the facts on the ground and give the news is anti-Semitic. Holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel, calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or extremist view of religion, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such, or the power of Jews as a collective, such as, especially not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy, or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions, accusing Jews as people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, even for acts committed by non-Jews, denying the fact, scope, mechanism, e.g. gas chambers, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. So look, here's the thing, man. Many of these things they list are genuinely anti-Semitic. But then a lot of the things they list, particularly as it pertains to the state of Israel, are not anti-Semitic. It's factual to point it out. And they're saying, in some instances, making factual assertions about the state of Israel, the government of Israel, and the founding of the nation of Israel, that is anti-Semitic. So if you claim the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor, even though it is literally a settler colonial project, and it was founded on the Nakba, they say you're not allowed to bring that up. That's anti-Semitic. Look, don't get me wrong. Are there people on the far right who are using what's happening in Gaza as an opportunity to then do broad mischaracterizations of all Jews and, feed into this idea of a satanic cabal of pure nefariousness and evil? Yes, I've seen Nick Fuentes do that, right? That's absolutely true. And we need to call that out as anti-Semitic. But the overreaction and the backlash where they say, now you can't even bring up the war crimes of the Israeli government, or in some instances, even calling them war crimes, they say is anti-Semitic. That's absurd. That's beyond absurd. Malaysia asked for the abolition of the veto of the 5 permanent UN Security Council members, especially in the case of situations involving mass atrocity crimes such as genocide. Yeah, that absolutely should be the case. Absolutely. But it's not going to happen. The CEO of the ADL says, quote, "We have a major TikTok problem on a leaked audio and freaks out because young people are bypassing traditional media and challenging long-standing narratives about Israel's ethnic cleansing." So we're not going to play the whole thing, so I'm way over time here, but he basically says, look, we have an age problem. We don't have a blue and a red problem. We don't have a conservative and a liberal problem. When it comes to support for Israel, we have an age problem. And the age problem is driven by TikTok. Young people are watching TikTok, and it's making them hate the state of Israel. And in response to that, they basically are implying we need to ban TikTok, which, like I said, got through committee earlier and might eventually get a vote in Congress. They're freaking out, and their response is censorship. As opposed to, putting pressure on the state of Israel to stop doing a fucking genocide. Then we have this. We'll end on this one. Representative Chuck Fleischman. Listen to what he said.
You can tell the Palestinians I will never support a Palestinian myself.
Why do you support the genocide and all of the war crimes and collective punishment? Are you concerned about all the children?
Let me make it clear. Let me make it clear. Israel is our ally, will always be our ally.
Even if they commit war crimes?
They are not guilty of genocide, and I will support Israel forever.
Israel will stay your ally, even though they commit genocide. Even
that's your term.
Can you explain?
Even when they kill 30,000 kids, that is a statistic.
Israeli people on October. Let me tell you a statistic. Israel will exist. The Jewish state will exist.
That's not a statistic.
That's not what we're, and that is for God to do
nothing to do with what we're saying.
And I will always support Israel. I will always support Israel. And you can tell the Palestinians I will never support them.
I am a Palestinian myself.
Then I will tell you I will never support you. I will tell you to your face.
You want my cousins to die.
Goodbye to Palestine. We will support Israel forever.
So you are comfortable with...
Just FYI, this guy just said goodbye
always
to Palestine.
Support Israel.
So you just said goodbye to Palestine. So you are saying you are comfortable with the murder of thousands of children.
The Jewish people will never
you
suffer
are not
again
answering the question.
Under Palestinian terrorism, under Hamas, under Hezbollah.
What about
Israel
30,000 innocent civilians?
God bless Israel forever.
Thank you.
What are we supposed to do about this, right? What am I supposed to do with this? This man is insane. This man is a psychopath. There's not a reasonable, altruistic, empathetic, logical, rational bone in this man's body. We have people cheerleading genocide. Cheerleading it. I mean, I hate to end on such a down note, but it's a down story, man. It's a down story. And I wish I could put some positive spin on it for you, but there's nothing there. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.